Welcome, everybody. My name is Chad Corbett, for those of you that don't know me, and this is part of the Estate Professionals Mastermind podcast. Excited to bring a guest to you today outside of the conversation we normally have, but I think it's very valuable for everybody. So, Rod Khleif is here today, and we're going to talk about mindset and all of the hard lessons he's learned through his real estate career. He's an incredibly accomplished real estate professional, but most importantly, he's an incredibly accomplished manager of emotions and mindset, even in extreme environments where devastating losses have set in. So I think coming into the environment that, and I think Rob would agree with me, the environment we're heading into, we're heading into rough waters, and the recency bias is alive and well. And this is a lot like early to mid 2007, where at least 60% of our industry is saying it's going to go forever, supply and demand, but they're not realizing demand shuts off like a light switch, just like it did in '07. The trigger will be different. It's unlikely to be, exactly what it was, but real estate is subject to the greater macroeconomic picture. And that's what the most intelligent people are looking at. So I believe that it's important as we head into this that you focus on mindset, because you can roll up and quit. Probably a couple of million of your peers are going to, or you can change your mindset and actually gain strength in an environment like this. And Rod's a great example of this. He's living proof. And I think it's a very timely time to share this conversation with you guys. So, Rod, please introduce yourself and welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chad. Let's have some fun today. Yeah, maybe I should just go back and tell a little of my story because I think it'll really add some framework to what I think your peeps would really benefit from today. So, I immigrated this country from the Netherlands. I was born in Holland, wooden shoes, windmills. When I was 6 years old, I immigrated with my brother Albert, my mother's Vansha, and we ended up in Denver, Colorado. And really struggled initially. We ate expired food. We went to an expired food store, drank powdered milk with our cereal in the morning, which I promise you sounds better than it is. And I remember wearing clothes from the Goodwill and the Salvation Army all the way through junior high school. When I was 14, I lied about my age because I was tall to get a job at Burger King flipping burgers so that I could get a job and buy my own clothes finally. And now I'm sure you've got listeners that maybe initially had it harder than I did, but I knew I wanted more. And my mom had an incredible work ethic. So she babysat kids. We always had a house full of kids. She babysat kids so we'd have enough money to eat and so on and so forth. And she was a bit of an entrepreneur. With her babysitting money, she invested in the stock market successfully. And she also invested in real estate. And her first real estate acquisition was the house right across the street from us when I was 14. She paid about $30,000 for it. And when I was 17, she told me she'd made $20,000 in her sleep that had gone up in value, $20,000. And I'm like, what? You made 20,000, you didn't do anything? Screw college, I'm getting into real estate. So I went and got my real estate broker's license right when I turned 18, which you could do back then through education. Now they got smart and you need some experience before you can be a broker. But I was an actual broker right when I turned 18. Well, my first year in real estate, I made about 8 grand. This is, again, keep in mind, this is 1978. My second year, maybe 10 grand. But my third year, I made over $100,000. So back in 1980, that was some pretty decent change for a 20-year-old punk. Well, what happened between year 2 and 3? Well, what happened was I met a guy, I was dating his daughter, that taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology. I really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is just that mindset and psychology. Only 10 to 20% is the vehicle, the mechanical information, be it in my case, real estate, or other businesses that I've owned. It's primarily mindset. And so fast forward to today, I've built 27 businesses. When they fail, I don't call them failures. I call them seminars. Okay. And several of those businesses have been, worth tens of millions of dollars. Most have been spectacular, flaming seminars, but we fail our way to success, right? In 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And you might be like, wow. And I was like, wow. And they do the math on that. It's $8,300 an hour, which of course I did. And if you'd hold still long enough, I was bragging about it. And when, I got a head so big, I could barely fit it through a door. I thought I was a real estate god. And when that happens, God of the universe will give you a nice little smack. Well, that was 2008 and 9. I lost everything. I lost $50 million conservatively in 2008 and 9.
Now
You
let's
know,
talk about what that was, like, on your balance sheet, how much of that was real estate holdings
sure.
versus
It was all real estate. It was all real estate. I had 800 houses and I had several apartment complexes, and they were up and down the Gulf Coast of Florida. Okay. So they were 2 hours one way and 2 hours the other way and everywhere in between. And I was only at a 30% loan to value. I only owed 30 cents on the dollar. I was not over leveraged. Okay. People are like, oh, yeah, well, you borrowed too much money. No, that wasn't the case at all. So there were several things that caused this to happen. One was Florida has no state income tax. So property taxes are higher, which impacts what? Cash flow. I had properties in wind and flood zones, which is higher insurance, which impacts what? Cash flow. But what really killed me was maintenance. See, these were C-class houses for the most part. And it's C-class is A, B, C, and D houses. D is the hood, okay? But these were C. And so they're older. The demographics harder on them, okay? You're going to have a lot more maintenance. And so if I send a maintenance guy to one of my apartment complexes, everything's the same. Plumbing parts, electrical parts, HVAC, appliances, window locks. So you could stockpile parts and they're in and out in an hour. Well, if I had to send one to a house that's an hour and a half away one way, they'd have to go see what's wrong because every house is different. Then they'd have to go find a Home Depot or a Lowe's where we have an account, and that could be an hour round trip. And I don't know about you, Chad, but anytime Rod's happy ass tries to fix something at home, he ends up going to Home Depot more than once. And, it's the same thing with maintenance guys. And so what took an hour at one of my apartment complexes takes all day at one of my 800 houses. And that really killed my cash flow. But I thought, like you said earlier, everything was just going to be great forever. My only thing that makes me feel better about myself is there were countries that went bankrupt back then. So it makes me feel a little better. But the other thing, like the coup de grace, as it were, that really killed me was I didn't pay attention to tenant demographics back then. I do now, obviously. I've bought, I don't know, about 4,000 apartment units just in the last 3 years, but I didn't back then. And what I discovered was, if they had good credit and they had a job and they paid their deposit and their rent, I took them. I discovered that a lot of them were contractors, plumbers, electricians, drywallers, painters, roofers, which fell off a freaking cliff in 2008 and 9. So they didn't have work. So it was like the perfect storm. And then what was really interesting is my portfolio actually went upside down. Okay. So it dropped more than 70% here along the Gulf Coast of Florida. So anyway, one of the things that I'm known for talking about is the mindset it took to have 50 million to lose in the first place, but then the mindset it took to recover to the success that I'm blessed to have today. So we can drill down on some of those strategies if you'd like, Chad.
I want you said you're a Tony Robbins guy. So
Yeah.
one of the exercises is going back and actually feeling that. And I won't take you all the way back, but I do want to point back to that moment, like what was the turning point? Because I'm imagining you might not have given up, but you at least slowed down. You hit,
Oh no, listen,
you
I
hit
hid under a
apathy.
rock. I hid under a
Right.
rock for a few
So,
months. Okay.
so what I want to talk about is eventually that situation will get you to a point of apathy, which is the lowest feeling you could possibly experience. It's worse than depression, right?
Mhm.
So what was the trigger
The
that
catalyst.
that
Mhm.
brought you out of an apathetic state? I think
Yep.
that's super important.
Great question. Great. In fact, I've never been asked that question in a few hundred podcast interviews. Great question. So luckily there was, and it ties into what I want to talk about anyway, because luckily I was in Tony Robbins. You mentioned Tony. I followed him around the planet for 20 years. I was in his platinum partnership back then, right in 07 and 8. And that's his $100,000 a year. It's probably 4 or 5 times that now, but at the time it was 100,000 to be in this group for a year. So I was around people that were thriving through the crash. And they're like, oh, get up 50 million, stop whining, get up. And so I had that. Okay. Peer group is critical, guys. Who you hang out with is who you become. You show me your 3 best friends, I'll show you who you are in every aspect of your life, be it your personal life, your professional life, your health, everything. Okay. So many people default to people they went to school with or people they work with instead of proactively seeking people that want what they want, people that aren't going to be afraid of their dreams or crush their dreams because of their own fear or jealousy or guilt of being left behind, whatever. And so peer group is critical. So that's one component. I was lucky. Now I only met with them maybe once before it all crashed, but I was around people that were thriving. So that's number one. Number two is I'd learned that what you focus on is what you get. And so it would have been easy for losing 50 million to become my story. I use it now as a teaching mechanism, but it's not my identity. That's another thing. You never let your vehicle be your identity, because if the vehicle crashes and burns, you're crashing and burning if it's who you are. It's just your vehicle. And so you can fail, but you're not a failure, right? If it's just your vehicle. Now, I separated myself from that initial success to seminar, I call it $50 million seminar. I separated myself from that. And then I reassociated with what I wanted and why I wanted it. If you come to one of my boot camps, so I do sold out live events around the country. I've got one coming up July 29th, 30th, and 31st in Denver. And I'll tell you guys how to come if you're interested in multifamily real estate. But the first thing we do for an hour and a half is goal setting on steroids. Because how the heck do you get anything if you don't know what the heck you want? You got to know what you want. And you've got to know why you want it. And it's got to be clear. And so we spend time on that because again, you have to have a burning desire, like Napoleon Hill talks about in his book, Think and Grow Rich. You got to want it. And why do you have to want it? Because you'll have fear. You've got to push through that fear. You'll have limiting beliefs. Like when I immigrated, I was 6 years old. I didn't speak English. My mom threw me in school and I found out what bullies were for the first time. And I got my butt kicked because I didn't learn how to fight back yet. And then she thought it'd be a great idea to send me to school in wooden shoes and those leather shorts the Germans wear for Oktoberfest. So I got my butt kicked again. And then they chased me home and my mom would chase them off with a fly swatter and I'd get my butt kicked the next day. So I came up with this belief system that I wasn't good enough. And there's a lot of people have these limiting belief systems. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not young enough, old enough, strong enough, analytical enough, whatever. There's a reason the acronym for belief systems is BS because they 99.9% of them are BS. Okay. But you've got to be able to push through them. And so that burning desire is what gets you to take action and push through that stuff. Maybe you're comfortable and the comfort zone's a warm place. And again, as you mentioned, we're heading into a recession, could be a big one. And if you're in the comfort zone and you don't take action, you don't innovate or pivot, it's going to be a problem. And so again, the comfort zone's a warm place, but nothing freaking grows there. And so that burning desire, what gets you to push through. And that's why that's the first thing we do is goals. And we spend time on it. By the way, if you're not interested in real estate, if you go to rodslinks.com, I've got the goal setting workshop. I do it every year around the 1st, and it's got music. It's professionally done with a guide you can download. Just go there and rodslinks.com and click on the goal setting thing. Because it's a great thing to do. You should do it at least a couple times a year and have your spouse do it. Have your kids do it if they're teenagers for sure. I'll juice them. Just give me an hour and I'll juice them. But if you can come to Denver, come to my boot camp because you'll absolutely love it. But that's it. It started with peers. It was reassociating with what I wanted instead of what I didn't want, which was that loss. Yeah, I was licking my wounds underneath the rock for a few months, but then I just picked myself back up, Chad, and said, screw it. I can focus on this pain or I can focus on what I want again and reassociate. And so I redid my vision boards. I redid my goals. And again, guys, whatever you focus on, if you're listening to Chad, you're a leader. And for God's sakes, right now, the world needs leaders more than ever. But as a leader, you've got to pay attention to what you focus on. Don't get me started on the crap they put on the media. You got to stand guard at the door to your mind and bring in the good stuff. Like on my podcast, it's called Lifetime Cash Flow. I do this clip every week called Own Your Power. And that's what it's about. It's a 5-minute motivational clip about a different topic in self-actualization and motivation. The last one I did last week was on playing to your strengths, I believe. And so if you give me 5 minutes a week, I will juice you. So if nothing else, you might want to listen to it and listen to those episodes because they're really powerful. But as a leader right now, more than ever, you've got to pay attention and direct your focus because the most successful people on the planet are the ones that have the best focus. I listen to a podcast, a guy named Tim Ferriss. I get excited about my 13 million downloads. I think he does that in a week, but he interviews the best of the best in their class, the best athletes, Michael Phelps, the actors, Arnold and Jamie Foxx and Ed Norton and Hugh Jackman, billionaires like Ray Dalio, and he deconstructs their success. And I started to hear a pattern. They all meditate. What does meditation enhance? Focus, right? So focus is critical. I don't know about you. I'll be watching a movie, Chad, and I'll be sitting scrolling through freaking social media, and it's fun. But the problem with that is your brain is making these little micro decisions which kill your focus. Okay, so my wife and I talked about maybe doing a social moratorium for a while, self-imposed. But anyway, so there's a few things. Peer group, goals are critical, and focusing on what you want, not what you don't want. For example, they asked Mother Teresa when she was alive if she was anti-war. She said, no, I'm pro-peace. Kind of the same thing, but you see the message there. And so focus is just so incredibly important. Peer group is important. Knowing what you want is important. And then if you're someone that hasn't taken action yet, it's really making a decision. Okay, that's the first piece. You got to make a decision. And Latin root for the word decision means to cut off. If you're going to attack the island, you're burning your ships because you're taking their damn ships home. That's a decision. It's not a toe in the water. It's not a 1 foot in, 1 foot out sort of thing. It is freaking done. That's a decision. Once you make that decision that you want more with your business or your life or whatever, then of course it's massive action, and action mitigates fear. And that massive action starts with the first step. And sometimes that first step's the hardest step and the most important step of your life. Dr. Martin Luther King said, you take that first step in faith and the next step will be revealed. Lao Tzu 1,000 years ago said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, but you got to take that first step. You can drive all the way across the country at night, seeing 50 feet in front of you, and you could encounter obstacles, but other people have done it before. You'll make it. It's the same way with pretty much any goal that you have. You can't, if you're super analytical, which I know many of your audience is, you can't see the whole staircase, and you're not going to be able to check off every box before you take action. You just have to take some action with faith.
I want to interject there because this is something like that. Like, I think Tim Ferriss is an amazing individual. I've walked on fire with Tony Robbins, and I think that's so much fun, and I learned so much. I take for granted how much of that I actually like it imprinted on me. And the second time I went back to UPW, I'm like, well, who the hell doesn't know this? And it's like, when you're in a negative state, when you're not in the right mindset, a lot of that, it just bounces off, right? It's like, oh, easy for him to say. He at least had $50 million to lose. And it's easy for our ego to go, no, defend yourself, retreat so you don't have to look silly. And I've been trying to figure out, how do you convey like what we've learned to use to our advantage? How do you teach that to people in a simpler way? And I thought, what about physiology? What if I just talked about the physical, what is happening in your pituitary gland, like in your brain, in your amygdala, in your prefrontal cortex? What's happening? What hormones are coursing through your blood that cause this pile of cells to take certain actions or inaction that causes an electrical impulse this electrical impulse to happen versus that one? Like those neurocircuits to fire in one way versus firing in the other. And I started following Carol Dweck, PhD, Andrew Huberman, PhD, Stephen Kotler. And I've looked at the actual neuroscience of this. And something I've never really heard even those people talk about is the hormonal response to those steps. So you threw out a couple of metaphors like the headlights and you can't see all the steps and Lao Tzu. Like those represent the necessary components of achieving a goal. In retrospect, what I've found about myself and about most everyone else around me is the reason you pick up your phone and scroll through that while you're watching a movie is what? You get dopamine from it. You
that too.
You quite literally have built a neural pathway to release this little squirt of feel-good hormones from your pituitary gland when you see somebody likes you, or when you see a sexy woman on Instagram, or whatever it is, whatever your belief system, your values have literally fired hundreds of times and created a neural pathway in your physical brain. You get a reward for doing that. And your baseline dopamine keeps going up and up and up the more you do. That's why you hear people talk about addiction. You think about drugs. Well, we're all freaking addicted to cell phones at some level.
Sure.
The people who can't put them down, they have increased their baseline dopamine level to a point they can't live without their phone. And that's problematic. I haven't had television since 2005. I haven't had notifications on my cell phone since 2015 or 16.
Wow.
So my phone is only a proactive device. It is not a reactive. I do not react to a cell phone unless I'm expecting a call from my family, and it only vibrates. It doesn't ring. It makes no noises. It has no badges. And that has brought so much quality to my life. But what I find is I get my dopamine hits from things like saving money, reading books, like the steps. And when I say I will give away, I will, in front of the world for who knows the umpteenth time, I will contribute $20 million of pure value to the world in the next 9.5 years before I turn 50. It's going to happen. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
Now, heading into the environment we're heading into, people are like, how the hell are you going to do that? And I'm like, I have no damn clue. Like, but
you're doing it with your podcast, buddy. You're doing it with your podcast.
Every time I get a YouTube view, every time I get a sale, every time a new amazing person comes into my life, every time a positive review comes, I get my dopamine hit because that step got me closer to 20 million in value. I don't need the money for myself. I don't need to be doing this. I've gamified this where I get dopamine releases from things like that, like by getting every step I take, every turn you turn, to go back to your metaphors, Like, don't try to get your positive reinforcement or that hormonal response. It doesn't come from achieving the goal. It comes from the pursuit of the goal.
Celebrating progress on that pursuit. I don't
Right.
care what you got done. I don't care how little it was. I teach this weekly planning process, and one of the most important pieces is to look at the previous week and acknowledge and celebrate what you got done, because you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have delays. But if you acknowledge consciously, and the operative word is consciously, don't pass it over. I don't care if you just read one page of a book, pat yourself on the back. That's the key to happiness. It's happiness comes from progress and growth, never the goal.
Dr. Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, they co-authored a book called The Gap and the Gain. Have you read that one yet?
No, but I know Dan Sullivan. He's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. So Ben writes the book, and then he and Dan come together and discuss it and talk about it. So Dan's mindset, and it's essentially what he discovered in his, I think in his 30s probably, is that you can either measure the gap, which is how you came up short, how you lost a $50 million portfolio, all this negative, or you can look at the gain. And you could say, well, yeah, I lost $50 million back in '08, but we were eating expired food 50 years ago. Look at the gain. A lot of people try to teach this in a lot of different ways. And for me, like, I've gotten a lot of inspiration, but when my psyche rejects something because it's like, oh, easy for him to say, then I stop and immediately I try to identify that. Like, is that ego, or does that violate your beliefs or your values? And that person is just full of shit. Or is it you? Is it in you? Is it you thinking small and your ego response trying to
Oh,
protect
that's good.
yourself?
That's impressive.
What I find is almost always it's coming from inside. It's an ego response saying, oh, that guy doesn't, yeah, that's not for me because I'm scared. Right.
Mhm.
I found really fascinating in looking at the actual neuroscience of it. And where does tenacity come from? Where does grit come from? Like, why will you not quit? Like, you can't quit. And it's because you've learned, I believe you hit that point of apathy, which created an emotional low point in your story. And you said, never again.
It's so funny you said that, because I want to give you the incredible example of that. Okay. That 50 million was the second time I crashed and burned. The first time I crashed and burned, which I don't talk about publicly, I was in $1 million house, I had a Maserati, I had a Rolls Royce. I was banging in my 20s. Everybody thought I was a drug dealer, but I was just good at real estate. But I lost everything. Okay. To the point where my house got foreclosed on. This is 30 years ago. Okay. My house got foreclosed on. I'm sorry, more than 30 years ago. This is 40 years ago. My house got foreclosed on. I lost everything. I had to sell my Rolls Royce to make payroll for a fraction of what it was worth. And I ended up painting houses to have enough money to eat. So I went from Rolls Royce, freaking $1 million house, to paint. And my mom bought me groceries and brought them to me because she was worried about me. Okay. So Rolls Royce to mom bringing me freaking groceries. That's the apathy. That was the low point. I remember painting a house, throwing the brush down, and literally crying and saying, "But this, I'll never do this again." And having that moment you just described. That's why I had to interrupt you, man, because that just defined exactly what I went through back then. And I said, I'll never go through this crap again and feel sorry for myself. And that's one of the reasons I was able to pick myself up that second big time. I was in an $8 million house. Okay. I was mansion on the beach that second time around. And I lost that and all the craziness too. And now I live in a compound, 6 buildings, big main house, 2-bedroom guest house on the water, media building, exercise facility that's off the chain. And because God's got a sense of humor, I can see my old house across the bay. It's literally right across the bay from where I live now. But anyway, I had to interrupt. I'm sorry. Sorry, that's rude as hell. But
No, so that became an emotional anchor for you.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
as Tony you've heard him say many times, is you get what you tolerate.
That's it.
And good or bad, you get what you tolerate. And it sets a point. It sets a low limit. I will not tolerate. I will not go back into this mindset. I will not go back into this. And for everyone listening, where this becomes relevant to you, is what I'll caution you of is the most dangerous emotional state that I've ever encountered in my life is complacency, is being comfortable. So there's a band of, you'll tolerate so much, like so much to the upside, so much to the downside. If you tighten that down and you're very specific about what you won't tolerate and very specific about what you will tolerate or what you deserve, put differently, then it starts to happen really quickly. And that's been true in my life. Like anytime where I let off the gas and I just say, oh, whatever, I don't have time to resist that, or I don't have time to pursue this, then you just like a boat. If it's not under load, it'll eventually just coast and then you just kind of stall out. And you may not be off course. You may still be on course, but you're not moving forward. And what I find in my own life, and if you look at neuroscience, like, and if you listen to Tony Robbins or almost any other psychologist, like if we're not contributing and we're not growing, we're not fulfilled.
We're dying.
And you can say that working 8 hours a day, coming home, watching 5.5 hours of television, sleeping 6 to 7 hours, and then going back to do it all over again with an 80% debt to income ratio, the American dream. You can say that's okay and you're comfortable. But if you get a taste, if you say, I won't tolerate that, I want this, like you're allowed to actually have anything you want. You're supposed to have everything you want.
Nothing.
And I learned, I don't know, I wish I could put my thumb on what happened to me around 6 or 7 years old, but I just like you, I was like, I want the leather basketball shoes that my parents can't afford. I want the Jeep in high school. I want this and that. And I've turned my addiction, my dopamine dependency on saving money, negotiating deals, like kind of the opposite. Other people go out and they call it retail therapy. To me, to go to a store and blow a bunch of money at retail price, that's depressing as hell. I don't care if I do come home with new stuff. I'm like, I got bamboozled. I paid retail. Now I'll walk into a Macy's and pick out a Tommy Bahama shirt and offer them 70 cents on the dollar. And if they take it, I'm like, hell yeah, that was fun. And that's a true story. I did it to prove a point in front of one of my friends. You can literally walk into Walmart and make offers. I did that. I bought $2,500 worth of stuff from Lawn and Garden to prove a point, $1,000. They took the offer. And like, I get dopamine from those because I set a goal to retire by 40. I achieved it well before that. And then I realized that it wasn't in alignment with who I am. Like, I'm a contributor. I want to grow. I want to be pushed. I want to be challenged. I want to have these conversations. If you are tired of hearing, you got to work on your mindset and you've got to set goals. If you're tired of hearing that, I just want you to be able to hear something differently. Like, physiologically, the reason the goal works is it forces you to actually have a hormonal response to the day to day, whether it's progress or regress. You can literally create neural pathways to give you a hormonal response to the progress that you're making on a daily basis. You literally become addicted to what outcome you want to achieve. And I've not heard anyone really teach it that way. And it's still a developing thought in my head.
I got to tell you, it's brilliant. And it ties in, though, to that acknowledgement I was talking about. Because the happiness comes from progress and growth. And I hate to say it, but we're a lot like dogs in that regard. Some people do it through food, but if you can train yourself to do it through that progress, where you get that little dopamine burst because you're making progress, that I think is one of the solutions. But I got to say a couple quick things because you covered a lot of material. And one of the other things with goals is it triggers your reticular activating system. And that's that subconscious filter in your brain that your brain points you in. It's not conscious, that if you associate with your goals and you really own them and you think about them. I got vision boards behind my green screen here that I'll look at and I'll visualize as if I already have them. That triggers that RES. And greatest example of your reticular activating system is when you first buy a car. You never really notice them, and then they're everywhere. Were they there before? Of course they were. But the other thing you talked about was being fulfilled. And we've all been taught to achieve to be happy. Like, we can't be happy until we've achieved, right? Let me give you an example of this. I told you about that $8 million house I built on the beach. When I lived in Denver, I was 18. I knew I wanted to live on the beach, and there's obviously no beach in Denver. And I dreamt about it for 20 freaking years. I'd visualize it and palm trees and sand and surf. And I built this incredible home. It was a beach on one side, and I had my boats on the backside. It was called a Gulf to Bay. And so it was a slice through an island. And just to give you a quick description, there was a giant waterfall from the second floor balcony into the pool. You had to walk through the waterfall to get to the pool. It was in magazines. It had tens of thousands of dollars worth of trees bending out over it. It had a spiral staircase up through the middle of the house, elevator, wine cellar. On the second floor, I had an aquarium built around the spiral that cost me almost $200,000. So it gives you an idea of the house. So 2 months after I moved in, I'm floating in the pool at night. Pool's changing colors, it's got fiber optic lighting, and I'm looking up at this testament to my ego. It's really what it was. It was to prove the world I was good enough. And my family's inside sleeping, and I got depressed. And I worked for this thing for 20 years. This was 2 months after I bought it. I moved in. Okay. And I was really depressed. And that's when I went out and bought some books. And one of them was Tony's book. And I went and saw Tony. And I found out that he fed families for the holidays. And I'm like, what a concept. Do something for someone else. So I called my brother in Denver, who I was visiting for Thanksgiving. I said, hey, let's feed 5 families. And so he went to his church and found 5 families that really needed help. And we brought toys for the kids, big boxes of food and frozen turkey and everything else. And the third family changed my life. We brought this stuff to the door, and a woman came out. She's a woman with 5 kids in this crappy 1 bedroom. Wasn't even a 1 bedroom. But anyway, she sees the food and stuff and starts crying. Her kids come out. 2 of the older ones start crying. I start crying. And I'm hooked. And I'm blessed to say in the last 20 years, we've fed 110,000 kids here where I live in Florida.
You, man.
Oh, thank you. We've done, tens of thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies. We've done tens of thousands of teddy bears to local police departments for their officers to keep in their cars if they encounter a child that's been traumatized. And I'm not saying this to brag, but there's a message in this that ties into what you were saying. And that is, again, we've been taught to achieve, to be happy. But if you give back, see, Tony Robbins calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. The achievement is a science. If you want to learn multifamily, for God's sakes, come see me in Denver and I'll give you a fantastic deal if you want to come. But fulfillment is an art. Okay. You've got to find out what juices you. And so for me, it's kids. Maybe for you, it's the elderly or the environment or animals or whatever it is. Give back right now. I don't care if you're listening to this saying, yeah, I'll do it when I have money. No, do it right now, because instead of achieving to be happy, you'll be happily achieving and you'll get there faster. Okay, so that's not why you do it, but trust me, that's the way the universe, God works. Whatever you believe, you get it back 1,000-fold. And so that's how you're fulfilled while you're achieving, if you're incorporating giving back while you're doing it. So anyway, I just had to throw that in before we move.
Oh, that's great. So I want to go back to the $8.5 million house. And what you experienced right there was, in less than 60 days, hedonistic adaptation. Hedonistic adaptation is the reason you shouldn't set goals based on tangible outcomes. A house is a house. And you can see, anyone who watches my show, I've lived in an RV for 1.5 years. I've lived in multi-million-dollar homes in Maui. It wears off. Like it's just a house. So you got to set goals internally, not like intrinsic goals, not extrinsic goals.
Give me an example.
Well, for me, like, I know I look out as in 10 years, I want to be respected. I want to be loved. I want to be healthy, and I want to be lighthearted. And I want to know what it feels like to give away $20 million to make the
That's
world
tangible.
a
That's
better
tangible.
place.
Okay.
So, but what I'm chasing is the emotion. So I'm not saying I need an 8,000 square foot ski home in Aspen because that's going to prove to me or to the world X. What I try to focus on, what I call feeling-based goal setting. So let's sit down and say, what are the emotions, the positive emotions that you appreciate the most in your life? And it can be different for everybody, but write down those words. Like, what are all the ways you want to feel? And it can be like literally just cover a page, let it be a word cloud. And then for the next 5 minutes, go through and keep, kill, combine. So which of these are synonymous and which one do I have the strongest emotional response to? That's your word. So you could say care, love, happy, fun, and love is going to be obviously the one with the most intensity. So one of those core desired feelings would be love. I want to feel loved. And you could say, I want to be happy, playful, joking, funny, and happy is one. So you want to feel loved, you want to feel happy. And then really like get it down to like 5 core feelings, like the way you want to feel. So no KPIs, no numbers, nothing like this, to get the tangibles out, like in your heart, intrinsically, who the hell are you and who the hell do you want to be? And what does that person feel like? How do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel stressed? Like, do you want to feel cynical? Or do you just want to feel lighthearted and peaceful and as a contributor? So really think about those things. Like, instead of saying, I'm going to do X number of deals, or I'm going to own X number of doors, or I'm going to have X number of square feet, or this or that, what the hell is that going to bring you? What will a portfolio of 8,000 doors bring you? For a lot of people, if you don't have the right skill set, it's going to bring you the worst job you've ever had in your life. It's going to be a massive fucking headache and a huge amount of risk, and you're going to have trouble sleeping at night. But if you've built your way up there slowly and you've had good mentors and you've got a good operations in place, it can really be passive income, but it's that way for very few. But even if we scale this down, you say, I want to do 50 residential real estate deals this year. What will 50 residential real estate deals bring you? Will it pay off your kid's student loan debt, which will make you feel love? Like you'll feel like, anyway, there's no right answer. I can't give that answer to anyone. What I can do is say, quit focusing on KPIs, numbers, and tangible objects. Focus on inside of you. How do you want to feel? And when you set a goal, It should be moving you toward that. When you make a decision, everything gets passed through those filters. When you meet a new woman, does she make me feel like, does she help me get closer to these 5 feelings? Or when you go to buy a new car, does it help you get closer to those 5 feelings? Maybe you should drive a Ford, even if you can't afford a Ferrari, because you wanted to contribute to a food bank, and the Ferrari is going to take that money where you're not going to do that. So you won't feel that sense of contribution. You'll feel hedonistic adaptation, right? So I've been challenging myself to find a way to encourage like more of the how to set goals. And I know that not everybody's me, different things work for different people. But what has helped me achieve things, the desired outcome in the shortest amount of time, was focusing my goal setting on emotions and then really looking at creating habits around your daily activity and even the tangible things you surround yourself with, like getting addicted to progress or getting addicted to the process, the steps and in place. So nobody wants to say everybody wants the feeling of Mount Everest, but I think it's around, what is it, around 3% of people who attempt it actually finish and summit. And that's those people who look at every single step as an achievement, right? Like, so I got, all right, one step closer. Where if you just focus on staring at the top the whole time, you're probably going to be one of the ones that comes down in a stretcher.
My only question to you is, how do you see, in my definition of goal setting, they need to be quantifiable and measurable. And an emotion is a little ethereal. It's a little more challenging. I'm not to say you couldn't do it. I could just see it being harder than a tangible. It's never about the goals. They say that it's the happiest days of a boat owner's life, the day they buy the boat, the day they sell the boat. It's about who you become on your path to your goals, as long as you're acknowledging progress and growth. But like I say, we do goal setting as well. It is more tangible, I think, than your example. But most people spend more time planning a birthday party than they do designing their lives. And in both of our situations, we're designing our lives, be it, goals based on emotion or goals based on tangible. And bottom line is you need goals, because otherwise you're like a ship just drifting in the ocean. You've got no destination, no outcome in mind.
I'll give you an example. When I used to follow Vern Harnish's Rockefeller habits. I had the one sheet and I had my 1-page strategic plan. And I had that, and I tracked KPIs like relentlessly. I had hundreds of things that I tracked. What I found, and I had built a real estate brokerage. What I found, I was working harder than I ever had, and I was less fulfilled than I'd ever been, with the worst profit margin of any business I'd ever run. And I was just busting my ass for a 10 to 15% margin, which to me seemed like a really stupid business model, because why work so hard when I could do 3 or 4 deals without all the expense and overhead and activity and headache? I can sell 2 houses and make the same amount of money as I did on a 15% margin, right? Because I have like a 90% margin. So that's when I challenged myself, because I built a trap. Like I did through my numbers goal setting, I said, I'm going to do 150 residential real estate transactions single-handedly. I'm going to net this much off of it. And I was chasing numbers, and I just wasn't doing the things that made me feel the way I wanted to feel. And the inspiration for me there was actually a lady out of British Columbia named Danielle Laporte. I've never met her, never been able to thank her, but she was a guest on somebody's podcast, and I just heard a 5-minute snippet of this podcast, and she was talking about, why don't we set goals based on how we want to feel, not what we want to achieve? And I'm like, damn, ultimately, any goal that you set that could have a number or a tangible outcome, you're chasing a feeling. So let's identify that feeling and just chase that today. So instead of pursuing happiness, let's be happy today. And then happiness we don't have to wait 20 years. We don't have to wait until we have 5,000 houses. So I sat with that. I went home. I barely slept that night. I got up at like 4 the next morning and just started writing. And that's where I came up with my core desired feelings. And as hard as it was, I actually kept a paper copy of my 1-page strategic plan with me at all times. And especially when I felt down, I would get it out and I would go through it and I would go toward it. And I committed to change that behavior that day. And I put it in the desk drawer and I said, you will not look at this. What ultimately ended up happening is I shut the real estate team down, because what I looked at is I had built a trap that wasn't serving me, and I wasn't getting any closer to being the man I wanted to be. what I was doing is that the metaphor I use, I was riding a lion. So when someone sees you riding a lion, they think, oh, that guy's a stud. Look at him. He tamed the lion. But as soon as you have to pee, you jump off, your lion's going to eat you. So you have to stay on that thing's back. Otherwise it's going to consume you. And that's what the brokerage world had become for me. I'd create lots of busyness, lots of activity, lots of revenue, lots of money, lots of deals. But it was a lion for me because I just wanted sometimes to go camping for 4 days and to relax. And relax was something that I hadn't done in weeks or months. And so ultimately, that shift in goal setting took me out of that whole reality changed for me because I realized I'm not loving and peaceful and, and appreciated. I'm running around busting my ass. I'm always busy. I never sit down to relax. I'm reading 100 books a year, but is it really what I want to do? And what I found is I never really had peace in my life. I was kicking ass from business metrics if you look at KPIs, but it wasn't the person who I wanted to be. And that's not to say that anyone who's setting goals differently, like I'm not saying you're wrong. What I'm saying is if you reject the traditional conversation about goal setting, it's just another perspective.
No, it's a valid perspective. My only feedback or comment about it is the actual facilitation of it and the acknowledgement of success in its attainment, where a tangible goal is pretty straightforward. You get it or you don't. With that emotion, it's a little more ethereal. So I could see the challenge. I would like to mention though, if you don't mind, can I put a plug in for my upcoming event? If anybody's interested in multifamily, do you mind if I mention it real quick?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So if you guys have an interest in multifamily, I've got a 3-day boot camp. If you DM me on any social channel, you can come for $197. The price is going up in a couple of days. This will air after that, but you can come for $197. It's not a sales pitch. So if you have an interest in real estate, if you don't, just never mind. But if you do, you can text my name, Rod, to 72345. We go through every aspect of buying apartment buildings. My students own somewhere between 60, 70,000. And I've only been teaching about 4 years. So I'm really proud of that. And that's actually my coaching students, not my boot camp ticket students. But we should have 1,000 people in Denver. Again, just text Rod to 72345 if you have any interest in that at all. But back to my comment. How do you measure success in your example?
So that was the other thing, like the self-awareness is what
Right.
really my self-awareness grew tremendously because of this methodology. So I have to check in with myself more often, right? How do you feel? Like, because I don't have a KPI sheet to look at. So it made me way more introspective. And I had to say, how do you feel and why? And what can you do about it? So behavioral changes happened way faster because of this. Because if I'm stressed out, it's like, whoa, 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 take a step back. How do you feel? I'm pissed. Why? And you realize you're living out of alignment with the goal you set. So if you've created an environment of employees, tenants, contractors, whatever that is, if it's a constant headache and you have heartburn and you're holding pressure, you're trapped and you can't sleep at night. Well, for me, that's where I say, let me pull out my KPI sheet, which is my emotions. Like, how did I say I wanted to feel? And how do I feel? Well, then I'm living wrong.
Oh, I like
And
it.
that's ultimately what led me to camp over 1,500 nights in the backcountry in a tent or a hammock, to travel Nepal, developing clean water systems on motorcycles to villages that no white person has ever been
Hmm.
to just say yes to things that I had to create hard boundaries in business. But I wanted to feel like I was contributing to the world, and giving money away had that hedonistic adaptation had set in on that. I could give $1,000 and it didn't mean shit to me anymore. But when I go to almost to the Pakistani border and get a Royal Enfield motorcycle and ride almost all the way to Myanmar and save thousands of lives in between, that got my juices going, right? Like I got norepinephrine, I got dopamine, I got adrenaline, like I had all that stuff. So I started to live my life based on emotional goal setting. Now I still have numbers. I use the EOS system to run.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Gino Wickman's book, Traction. Love it.
Yeah, Rod. It's so I have emotional goal setting as my top tier. Right below that is all the strategy. So it's not that I don't have numerical goals or tangible goals. The emotional goals are the top level. And then obviously in order to achieve that, you've got to have some tangibles, and that's the next level down. So that's what got me through my stinking thinking about hearing people say, get the right mindset, you got to set goals. And every time I rejected it, I changed the way I set goals, and I just kind of moved that traditional approach down to the second layer in the stack.
Okay.
I'm 40 years old. I'll change my mind in the next 20 years, I'm sure.
Mm.
With experience, we become more experienced. We become
Well, I've got socks that have 2 decades on you, so yeah, I've got sock experience too. That's funny. Well, I really appreciate you having me on the show, brother. This has been a lot of fun. You're a brilliant guy. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I really honestly, if you take anything that you want and you ask yourself why enough times and you drill down on that why every time, we all just want love. We all just want happiness.
you'll land on emotion every time.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and those are typically the 2 emotions that everybody wants, love and happiness. And so it's a very unique perspective, and I appreciate you sharing it. And I'm gonna think about it myself.
Well, thanks for being here and contributing to our community. Guys, we'll have all of his socials and links and all the many ways you can get a hold of him and sign up for the event in the show notes below. And if you guys have any questions, please reach out to him or reach out to us, and we may have you back.
Thanks, brother.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.